Craig, are we ready? I got you.
Maybe we'll go ahead and get talking about
The regular meeting of the Caroline County Planning Commission will come to order. I invite all to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. By way of introduction, to my far left, we have Mr. Steve Rollins, who is representing the Mattaponi District. To my left is Dr. Carol Horton, representing Port Royal. I am Bob Schwartz, representing Bowling Green. I am the chairman. To my immediate right is the vice chair, Mr. J.D. Young, representing Reedy Church. To his right is Mr. George Weaver, representing Madison. And on the far right is Mr. Richard Williams, representing Western Caroline. We have Mr. Leon Hughes, our Director of Planning and Economic Development. Mr. Brad Robinson, our Zoning Administrator. Mr. Craig Pennington, our Planner. And Mr. Chris McKenzie, our County Attorney. We also have Ms. Priscilla Voigt, who is operating our audio and video, keeping us online. Commissioners, you have received in your packet the minutes from our regular meeting on October the 24th, 2024. If you've had a chance to review them, are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, is there a motion regarding the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I will accept these minutes as provided to us.
Second. I will second that.
All right, motion by Mr. Weaver, seconded by Vice Chair Young and Mr. Williams. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Motion carries. The minutes are approved as submitted. All right. Any unfinished business? There being no unfinished business, our first item on the agenda is text amendment 05-2024. I believe Mr. Hughes is going to be the presenter on this.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Tonight, during your October 24th meeting, the commission expressed concerns as we were talking about a potential amendment to the M1 zoning classification, making data centers, taking them from being a by right use to a special use. And so the commission expressed concerns about the potential options or standards that may be considered for inclusion in any new language related to the requirements for data centers. Staff considered the comments and suggestions of the commission and prepared draft language that may address the items noted important by the commission. The draft proposes new definitions for data center, for reference, data center and non-campus data center, while maintaining the current definition of data center for reference. The new definitions incorporate language which establishes minimum standards for data center campus uses to be permitted as a by right use in the M1 zoning district. Specifically, the by right campus data center requires a 75-acre minimum parcel introduced at least at last meeting, as well as the facility use an air-cooled system or a closed-loop non-evaporator system or reuse water where available for cooling equipment rooms. And as for the campus data center, will still be subject to the standard, the non-campus data center would still be subject to the conditions contained in Article 7 of the Plan Innovation and Research Technology Park. I kind of misspoke there. All data centers would be subject to those provisions. Just want to be clear there. The draft language for Section 3, uses permitted by special exception as proposed to be amended to include the non-campus data center definition subject to the standards contained in Article 11, Division 7, Plan Innovation and Research Technology Park, as amended November 16th, 2023. Any proposed data center not in conformance with the new campus data center definition will require approval via the special exception process. As noted, this language was drafted in response to the discussion of the commission during the October meeting. The commission has discretion to make adjustments as the commission deems appropriate. And as noted in October, any amendment to the language that was advertised for the joint public hearing with the board will require re-advertisement or will require advertisement for a new public hearing in accordance with Section 15.22204 of the Code of Virginia. The draft language is on page 2 that was in your packet, and for the public's consumption here, up top is the current definition of data center. In the middle there, the second definition is a data center campus, which means a data center that is one located on a single parcel of land that is 75 acres or more in size. 2, uses air-cooled system, a closed-loop non-evaporative system, or a reuse water system where available for cooling equipment rooms. And then you have the non-campus data center definition, means any data center that is not a campus data center. And then the 2 sections of the M1 district would be the uses permitted by right, where it says campus data center subject to the standards contained in Article 11, Division 7, Plan Innovation, Research, and Technology Park as amended. And then in the uses permitted by special exception, a non-campus data center subject to the standards of the PERT also. So those were the definitions that were created in an effort to address the concerns that were raised by the commission. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any. Mr. McKenzie is here as well to help us through this process if you have any questions.
Commissioners, any questions of Mr. Hughes at this point?
So we didn't get Article 11 in this packet, correct? It's in, because I was going through all my previous packets.
The PERT ordinance,
Yeah, it's back in our old PERT ordinances, right?
yeah, that's part of the PERT ordinance. I don't think we gave you, we sent you the stuff, the maps that were included.
Yeah, I got those.
Yeah. But no, this packet did not include the entire PERT ordinance.
Okay. I just want to be clear with what. So the changes from what we said last time is we're still considering the 75-acre campuses, but you're redefining some of the language. Well, you're clarifying some of the language, I guess is a better way of saying it.
Or setting standards, yeah, for what a data center campus is, with the standard that they have to use be air cooled, a closed loop non-evaporative system, or reuse water where available.
Okay.
In addition to the 75 acres.
Okay. And the 15 lots we were talking about at our last meeting, they're already M1. I just want to clarify some of this and make sure that myself and any of the public knows what we're talking about.
Yeah, the lots that we were talking about here, I'll show you. So
Yeah, I had the map.
So
yeah.
the lots on this map here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so these are this is a map of parcels that are between 15 and 74 acres, and those that are 75 acres or greater that are zoned M1, that have utilities available to them.
Utilities, and somehow they're gonna have water for change out?
Well, these parcels here do have water available.
They already
to them.
have the water available to. Is 75 acres big enough for a data campus?
It is. Just as an example, the Avio site that was approved behind the Flying J, that the developed area, that total area that they got their proffer amendment on was like 135 acres, but there were only 97 of that being developed, and that was could be up to 5 structures.
Okay, so out of these, is there any environmental areas that are environmentally sensitive areas on these 15 potential?
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you
Lots.
definitively, but I would imagine that most of the parcels in Carolina, there is some type of environmental feature, the potential for an RPA, potential for some upland wetlands. But, those areas have requirements for development where they can't be disturbed. So you can't disturb any wetlands without any mitigation. You can't disturb any RPA. The PERT ordinance even, has additional setbacks to help protect the environmental sensitive areas, has a 20% open space requirement in it. So I think there is sufficient land on 75 acres, unless it's just inundated with wetlands or streams, that, it would be of sufficient size to create a campus style facility.
Okay. All right, I don't think I have any more questions at this time.
Mr. Rollins?
So if we decided to do the special exception, you're saying that we wouldn't have to have a public hearing, right? If that was the route we went tonight.
So initially the options that were presented had an option of just moving the use from a by right use to a special exception use.
Okay.
So anytime there's a special exception involved, there is a public hearing required.
I mean, for us to change the verbiage.
Oh, yeah. If you amend the language, yes, there will be a public hearing. Yes, sir.
Okay, so we wouldn't require one of those.
Yeah.
So if we did special exception, would we need the 75-acre stipulation in the verbiage if we went to special exception, or could we handle the acreage without that being in the verbiage if we went to special exception?
If you could still require it to be 75 acres with the special exception, that could be an option as well. Yes, sir.
Without it being in the verbiage in the.
We would have to craft it so, or you could just move it to the special exception requirement. You could, if you wanted to, you could take data center campuses and take that definition and put it as a special exception. Yeah.
So with special exceptions, would there be an opportunity for a person who wanted to put a data center, let's say on Bath Road or wherever, would we have opportunity to be able to get some, if they decided they want to give something to the community for us looking at the fact that they wanted the data center there, let's say, for instance, if they wanted to donate $1 million to a tech institute at the high school or something, we would have more opportunity to be able to deal with that under special exception versus by right.
No, I don't, because in the special exception process, the board has the ability to impose conditions. Those conditions have to be germane to the case. So if you had a special exception process and someone was going to do that, they would have to do that outside of that process. In a rezoning situation, an applicant could potentially offer, some contribution to something that was, again, there was some nexus to the case. They could make some contribution or offer if they chose to.
So that would only be through a rezoning where you would have like a proffer.
Right, correct.
Okay. Does the special exception give us another step to be able to mitigate things with a person who's potentially want to put a data center in?
It does. The special exception process is just what it is. It is a public hearing process. It is an opportunity if there's some condition that the commission or the board wanted to mitigate, they could impose a condition as a part of that special exception. All of our special exceptions typically come with conditions, and they vary. So when we have special exceptions related to, let's say, wedding venues or event facilities, we typically condition, the number of events, days of the week that they could have that event, maybe the time frames. So, there are any number of conditions that you could impose on a particular case to address the uniqueness of that particular case.
And my last question, in the purpose and intent, that's a statement in there about orderly growth.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you describe to us what you consider orderly growth when it comes to data centers for the county?
So I think it would go back to the development of the PERT ordinance at the very beginning. So if you go back, the county originally established 2 PERT areas, and as part of establishing those 2 PERT areas, the Mattamead area and then the one here in Carmel Church, identified those areas as appropriate for data centers. And then as a part of that process, one of the reasons it was made as a by right use was because there were parcels that were of significant size that were in areas that kind of met the same criteria of, being large, being not having dense residential population near them, and having utilities available to them. And so the use was made a by right use because, like I said, this map on the screen is a good example of parcels that kind of meet the same criteria as the PERT areas. There are parcels that are large, that are relatively distant from residential development. So I think that's why it was initially made a by right use, because those areas were identified. You could have a data center there and they'd have limited impact on the residents. The big concern from a daily living perspective relative to data centers is typically noise. And so having data centers on large parcels distanced from residential development, you kind of address that concern from a daily living perspective. I mean, that's the main concern is noise.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
Well, I kind of was leaning toward the influx. So as far as when we say orderly growth, is it gradually, or is it just you open the floodgates? What as the candidate we consider orderly when it comes to data centers? Do we just open up the floodgates and say, as long as you meet this criteria, if 100 data centers come, then 100 data centers come?
Well, I think that's a matter of perspective. If 100 data centers came to the area where you wanted them to come to, then I would say that would be orderly growth, because that's where you identified that you want that use to occur. I mean, that's why we have a future land use map. And so, every type of use has its own particular impacts. And so would I say orderly growth would be 100 subdivisions coming to an area that's identified for residential development? Maybe not, because there are other impacts that come along with that particular use: population, traffic, impacts on public services. When you start to jump over to the commercial realm and industrial realm, well, you do have impacts through your construction phase. You have impacts on traffic. But when that use is completed, whatever that use may be in that construction or industrial realm, then typically that use shouldn't have very much impact if it's in accordance with your plan, and you have appropriate controls in your ordinances to deal with the negative impacts. So I think 100 at one time might be orderly in one respect for one type of use, and it might not be for another type of use.
Right, thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions?
So we're not actually, we're not actually voting on, we've got to vote on having a
Public
public hearing tonight. And you're suggesting this new text amendment you gave us, you're suggesting replace that with page 1. That would replace page 1. Is that the suggestion?
The suggestion is that we would create these two new definitions of campus data center and non-campus data center, and then in the permitted use section, where it says section 2 of the M1 district, you would insert campus data center as a use, and then in the uses permitted by special exception, you would insert non-campus data centers. So when you say replace page 1, I guess you mean replace the option of just simply taking it from a by right use to a special use.
Well, page 1 is, well, I guess not page 1, but what was on the table was special exception. And so you're suggesting this new idea, this new language, which we have page 1 and 2, I guess.
You're referring back to the original document. Yeah. Okay, I see. Yeah. So,
And that's what we're to
Yeah.
take to public hearing.
yes. So in the original option, the original public hearing with the board, on page 1 in your packet, it was simply striking the data center use from the permitted section and then placing it in the uses permitted by a special exception section.
Correct.
That was it. It was a simple take that use from one category and put it in another category. So yes, the suggestion is to add this language in the ordinance, these definitions, and then add those new definitions in the 2 sections. Uses permitted by right and uses permitted by special exception.
So, Mr. Hughes, primarily you're saying 75 acres or more would be by right with these conditions. Less than 75 acres would be special exception with these conditions.
Correct.
And on top of all of that, we would still, the PERT would be wouldn't be impacted, but would be an overlay or overshield over top of all of that.
Yeah, they would still have to comport with the PERT ordinance. And it's
Okay.
not, I just want to be clear, it's not any parcel at 75 acres. I mean, it's
Right.
you have to
M1.
have the utilities available. So
Right.
a parcel out in the more rural portion of the county would not comport
Correct.
with that. So, and that was the intent of this map, is to show where those parcels would be that meet that criteria.
So the criteria would be M1 districts with data centers that would have the utilities. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So with that being said, what percentage of M1 parcels are in the county as a whole?
It's a very low percentage of
Less than 1%?
probably, yes.
Okay. So now we're talking about the county being rural preservation, over 90% and less than 1% of growth. And this is what we're bickering about? Is that what we're complaining about? 1% of the county that we've identified as a growth area?
well, I don't know if I'd characterize it as you just did, but
Okay.
94% of the county is zoned RP.
Correct.
And so the question is, on the table is, should this use be by special exception or should it be by right with certain conditions?
So we ask developers and businesses to come to the county, and we specifically tell them to go to a certain area, but yet we're going to put handcuffs on them and not allow them to function or to at least come here. Because if they don't have by right, I mean, why would I, as a developer, come in here and buy 75 acres or 100 acres if I can't really develop? Doesn't make sense to me. How do we have an open door policy, but yet it's good for this guy, but not good for this guy? It just doesn't make, I think we open ourselves up. You guys are the professionals. That's why y'all are hired. Y'all are the professionals. And I certainly appreciate you because you know what you're doing. So you're guiding us. You're giving us the information as to what we need to make better decisions. So with the terminology that you have put together here, we've been going back and forth over it for quite some time. Our legal team has been over this. I'm not understanding why it's just not, let's take it to public hearing. Let's see what has to be done. It makes sense to me that we need to move forward with the language that we have here.
Any additional questions?
I would second that position as he just stated.
All right, that's not a motion.
Not yet.
Okay, it's not a motion, but
I understand. I got you.
I was gonna make it a motion. But what he just stated clearly is what we've been going around with this for
Exactly.
2 months, at least 2 months. And I think we've reached a point now where we have to render a decision and ask the public, what do they think?
Well, I think the public has already made it very clear what they think. Mr. Williams, do you have any questions, sir?
No, I'm good.
Mr. Hughes, I do, sir.
Mhm.
I'm a little concerned when we start giving two classes of definitions. The data center campus, I'm on board with that one completely. What I see as wiggle room is the data center non-campus. Where is that? What is going to determine a data center to be a non-campus, and where would it fit in?
So that's why we created the two definitions. So if you don't comport with the data center campus definition, then you are a non-campus data center. So
if we're creating two different omelets, one made with ham and one made with cheese, we've still got omelets, but we've got different flavors. So we're still creating two things to accomplish one. And that's just my opinion on it. I think we're trying to be redundant. You know, let's find something that fits all. Like I say, the definition you have for campus, I think is spot on. I have no difficulties with that. But when you go and you create a subgroup, then I think that's where we're going to wind up with a difference of opinion. And I'm really not in favor of this non-campus style. Yes, sir.
I totally agree. I would like, as a licensed professional, I would like somebody to tell me and describe in black and white what is a non-campus data center.
That's the question.
So a non-campus data center is a campus center that would not meet the criterion that is in the definition of data center campus. So it would be either less than 75 acres, or it would not use air-cooled or a closed-loop system, or reuse water.
And that's exactly where we're going to wind up in trouble, is by allowing data centers to not comply with the
With-
things that the other data centers will have to comply with.
Well, just for clarification, those would require a special exception. They're not by right at all. There's no by right use. The only by right use would be the campus data center. So if you're a that's the purpose of the definition. If you don't meet the criterion, then you require a special exception.
And in my opinion, sir, quite honestly, I think all of them should require a special exception. No difference for one than the other. Every data center should be required to have a special exception. You do that, then you don't have to define or have a sub-definition for a data center campus style. And I'm just going to throw that out to the commission for discussion.
I tend to agree with you. That's why I specifically asked for a professional to tell me what a non-campus data center looks like.
It's subjective. To me, it's subjective.
Right, and that's not, we don't want to do that. You know what, a building is a building, okay? It's got 4 walls and it has a door and a window, okay? That's a building. Now, what's a non-building? I don't know. So I think your question is relevant to what we're looking to do here. What is the difference between a campus data center and a non-campus data center? And I don't think, in my professional abilities, I don't think I could describe it.
Now, I will say Mr. Young did bring up a very good point, I believe, and that is future businesses wanting to come to Caroline to establish a data center. We don't want to run them away, but we don't want them running all over the county. That's why we're trying to maintain and exercise some control. If a data center wants to come here badly enough, they will conform to what we're asking.
Exception.
But aren't we saying what we want? I mean, the PERT spells it out.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
All
But
right,
when you
and
start
then-
subdividing or you start dividing your definitions,
Well, I mean, but I'm saying, if a landowner has 75 acres or more,
right?
it's by right. But if they don't have 75 acres or more, if they don't have 75 acres, then that would be a non-campus, a non-data center campus. And they would have to go through special exception. So there is an additional layer there for us to get what we want before the developer breaks ground.
And if a developer wants it bad enough, they'll take that step.
If they want it bad enough, we get to put conditions in place
Right, and we can do that with special exception.
with
We can't
special
do that.
exception. Yes, that's
We-
correct. That's correct. But by right, if you got 75 acres or more, you still have conditions that must be met prior to them breaking ground. We have those conditions in place. And
Point taken.
those conditions are stringent,
Point well taken.
right?
But we're still dealing 2 data centers, one at 76 acres, one at 74 acres, having to do different things.
Sure.
And my position is, let's make it one shoe fit all.
But we're talking about, when I say minimal, I'm going to get blasted for this, but you don't have that many parcels available. So again, we're talking about less than 1% of the entire county and in a controlled area of where these, after the fire's going to go out sooner or later, we're going to run out of land. We're going to run out of space to put these folks. That's it. Next, move on to something else,
I agree.
right?
But if you're going to make an apple pie, let's make it with apples and not peaches. Let's not mix the
Yeah,
two.
so I mean, I think the definitions are spot on. Unless you don't want to call it non-data centers. I don't know, you give it another title, but the definitions are the definitions and they are spot on.
I think the problem is the description of non-campus data center.
Give it another name. Found another name. Call it.
Or strike it.
The standards will still be the same.
Just strike it. Just strike it, okay?
Just strike it. I mean, Jay, that's what I say, let's just eliminate.
Mr. McKenzie is
He's itching to say something.
So,
Just to kind of set it up a little bit. So let me go through a little bit of the procedural history here. Because again, tonight, all that's before you tonight is, do you want to advance this kind of alternate set of language to a public hearing? And then send a recommendation up to the board one way or another on that alternate language. Because when you had the joint public hearing on the original language, which was just moving data center from by right to special exception, after some discussion, what staff took away from that meeting was, we want you to come up with some additional alternative language to consider that's a bit more specific. That's what's before you tonight. As far as the definitions go, you can't, the only way this functions is to have both definitions. And because one is specific and then one uses the specific one to basically catch everything else. So campus data center is the ones, in short, that are kind of contemplated by the PERT ordinance. Big data centers on large parcels of land that, as Mr. Young pointed out, that there's a relatively small pot of parcels that big that are already zoned M1, and they have to meet all these requirements. They have to be a single parcel over 75 acres, and they have to have these basically, non-water intensive cooling systems. And then those are the only ones in this revised version that would be allowed by right in the M1 district. So basically, you've been more specific than the original language, because you're saying, okay, those are the only ones we want to make by right. All the other ones are special exception. Now, that is, to Mr. Schwartz's point, that is a complication, right? Because the original way was much simpler. They're all special exception. But at the prior meeting on this, there were concerns that the staff heard about the knock-on effects of existing projects of making them all special exceptions, and maybe that was too broad a brush. And it's entirely up to this planning commission, the board, which route they want to take, which route you want to take. But in order to give the board the opportunity to consider this alternative, you have to have a public hearing on it, because we're adding new definitions, and you have to send a recommendation in favor or against up to the board. Otherwise, all they've got is the original one. So, and that is your call. But that is tonight procedurally what you have to do is decide, do we want to give the board a recommendation on alternative language, or do we want to just stick with the original language and make your recommendation?
and the original language being by right.
No, the original language being the opposite, everything special exception.
Okay,
Yeah, I got the original language here.
okay,
We had it last month.
yes.
Right.
Okay, I think we're on board because we're going back and forth and trying, I think in our minds, trying to get to a finalized version, and we don't need to do that at this point. But we still have to go through the step of public hearing.
If you want to send the board this alternative kind of version, yes, you have to have a public hearing on it. What this alternative version has done is broken out data center into two different definitions. Data centers that are on parcels 75 acres or more and cooled with these non-water intensive cooling systems, and then everything else. Those are the two types of data centers. If you're on less than 75 acres, or you're using water to cool your system, or you're on less than 75 acres and using water to cool your system, you have to get a special exception under this revised language. The only time you get to be by right is if you're on more than 75 acres, you're using non-evaporative cooling or whatever these other ones are, And you comply with all the PERT standards.
And that's an M1.
And you're an M1.
Okay.
And that's what this map behind you is showing you, the 4 sites that are over 75 acres, are not currently in use, and have available utilities.
I guess my problem is the terminology, non-campus.
So we have a couple of applications
That's-
in right now that are less than 75 acres, correct?
I don't know about that.
No? Okay, all right.
And non-campus is, you know, we're more technicians than artists with these things, and so you know, it's certainly a different. If the commission has ideas on, you know, a different term, you know, a different descriptor, that would be, you know,
That's exactly what I'm saying.
that's
okay?
that's an easy
The difference
fix.
between a campus data center and a non-campus data center, to me, it's the same thing, okay? Now, you can go through a whole description of what the differences are, and I understand that. But I just think that we're fooling around here with words that the average John Q. public is not going to know what we're trying to do here. Okay, I understand campus data center. I guess the terminology that's bothering me is campus data center. Well, let's say it's not a campus.
That gives you the idea of a singular building.
Thank you, sir. You just, I mean, as soon as you talk about a campus, you're talking about 3, 4
Multiple.
buildings, a couple of these, a little of this. I think I'm having trouble with the terminology campus. What is a campus? And I think legally, okay, that's where I'm having my issue. It's the description of what is a campus, okay? Now, you go to a college, you see all these different buildings all over the place. That to me is what I think a campus is. But based on what we're fooling around with here, and I don't want to drag this out forever, guys, but I just think it's the word campus that's bothering me more than anything else. And I lean on everybody here, including my attorney, to say, couldn't we use another terminology to describe that? DJ, I'm just asking, I'm
Yeah,
like you do,
and-
you bat it around and say, oh,
If it's important, I mean, if the planning commission can come up with something, that's wonderful. If you want to direct staff to come back to you with a host of options, we can do that. But you know, we were just trying to move this along as
no, and
quickly as we
I
could.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
You know that. I'm not trying to drag this out, okay? I just look, and when I see a campus, the first thing I think of is a university with a whole bunch of buildings around it. That's what I think a campus is. Now, what is a non-campus? Well, it means there's one building in the center of this area, whatever it happens to be. That's what I look at as a professional. And in my professional experience, the difference between a campus and a non-campus. So I'm just looking at this, guys, and saying, the words that we're using, to me, as a professional in this particular area, I don't like the wording. And I'm not asking anybody to go back and start over again. I'm not trying to do this all over again. I just think we're fooling around with campus data center and a non-campus data center. I think,
Can we require that all data campuses be at least 75 acres? And just, if they're under 75 acres, we don't want to consider them. Because we're getting, in my opinion, we're getting too many data centers and we don't have experience with them yet. Yeah, the tax revenue is going to be good.
Right.
But M1 is on 95 corridor now. It's probably going to expand in the future. And that means data centers could expand. And we do need to get this under control because right now it's a lot of buy rights out there. I mean, I still think 15 is too many, but I know we got to get it under control. So we got to reach a compromise somehow. Can we say that data centers must be 75 acres or more?
isn't that what it says?
Well, we're also talking about ones that are 74 acres and less than 7.
Carol, that's exactly what they did. See, in the beginning, it says data center campuses, and it describes it. That it's one on a parcel of land that is 75 acres or more in size. Now that tells you what a data center campus is. But now, if you drop just the next sentence down, data center non-campus means any data center that is not a campus data center.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Just
I'm reading the words.
that and
Attorney.
just keep 75.
I think you're actually talking about two separate things.
Okay.
You're talking about terminology, terms of art. You think we need to find a word that works better than campus data center. I don't know what that is. And I think I honestly don't, I agree that the phrasing is important. We favored speed over length, the crafting, coming up with their different things to get this before you. But we can certainly go back and come up with a list of descriptors and try to search around and say, what can we call this? Because I think we're in kind of uncharted territory here. So we need to come up with some descriptors. We can do that. I think it would be difficult to do it from the lectern tonight unless there's
No, I'm not trying to drag this out. You know that.
No, I know, but it's a good point. Now, Dr. Horton, on the other hand, is talking about not terminology, but the authorized uses. And I think what you're proposing, which would be only 75 acre or more 75 acre plus data center campuses would be allowed, is kind of a third alternative that we haven't looked at yet. But that would be more restrictive than what you considered the first time, right?
So Carol, let me ask you, are you saying that if it's under 75 acres, we don't want to even talk about it?
That's one idea I'm proposing.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, for consideration, because, I mean, right now it's an open door, applications are coming in and,
Yeah, but it only can be in M1 districts. It's not like it's all over the county.
Right.
but what we're saying is in the future, there's gonna be more M1s.
We have control over that. We can vote no
Yeah, but
for rezoning. So that's, to me, that's kind of like, if I wanted to bring a shopping center here in a commercial district, B1, you're telling me I have to have all of these criterias over here in order to bring a shopping center. I must have 75 acres, and if I got 73 acres, I can't bring a shopping center here. Me as a developer, I'm coming at you. I'm coming at you.
we
because
have
that's-
restrictions, lot restrictions.
Yeah, we
on
do
other-
have restrictions, and that's what these definitions are. These are restrictions. I mean, these restrictions are clear, plain as day.
I mean, I know you like the restrictions. I'm just proposing another one here.
Yeah. I just think we're opening ourselves up for liability when we say that, Chris, you can speak to this and tell us, I guess. We're opening ourselves up for liability if we say data centers can't come to Caroline County.
That's not what we're saying,
No, that's
sir.
not-
But you're saying if it's less than 75 acres,
Exactly.
Right.
And as far as your comment concerning developers, you're my friend. I love you to death. If a developer wants to come at us, bring it on.
I mean, it constantly
resources, wasted
happens.
resources. Yeah.
And there's gonna be more M1 down the road. I mean, you could say we could say no, but we could say no to this too. I mean, but we're not. We're trying to somehow reach a compromise to get it under control.
But we don't have water, sewer, utilities in place in those other areas.
We don't have them in place in this area either. I mean,
So-
we have wells, but we don't have, that's why we're saying
But
non-pool.
these places these data centers must have the utilities in place.
Well, anyway, that's one thought, saying the campuses have to be at least 75. That would limit the amount that's coming in, because that's my concern. We don't know. We need them, we need the revenue, but we don't really know everything about them. How's it going to work out for the county? And then eventually data centers are going to be replaced by something else, some other new technology. So what is the land going to be like afterwards?
I don't think that's any difference in a shopping center. Malls have a 30-year lifespan. You don't see them anymore. You probably won't ever see another mall in our lifetime. But what happened to the land? They demolish it.
They turned
Reuse
it
it.
into apartments. That's what the
Yeah,
malls.
they reuse
So
it.
that's a concern.
So the same with a data center. You're not having any environmental issues with them. I mean, I don't see any environmental impacts with it. We're not, and you mentioned earlier about not remediational areas, what you call it, environmental areas. Those areas are not going to be touched. They're not going to be impacted. So I'm not sure why a data center is a building, and the components on the inside of the building are components that come and go. You take them out, you remove them. They are not touching the land. They are not part of the land. It's a building.
Commissioners, if I could make an
Sure.
observation, I think staff is well aware at this point of what our concerns are and where we're coming from individually and jointly. We do need to have a public hearing on this matter. And if we could ask staff if this would be appropriate to have you make a few changes in the verbiage, and let's hold a public hearing on it and do it at our next meeting. And that, because there's nothing wrong with debate, and we can sit here and debate all night long. But until staff has an opportunity to get in and address some of the comments that we've made, I don't think we're going to make any progress further tonight. So it would be a recommendation of mine, if y'all concur, that we give staff an opportunity to address what the issues are. Go ahead and advertise for a public hearing at our next meeting, and we can dispose of the matter at that time. If there are any comments on that, I would appreciate it.
Would we be able to do both at the same time? Because if they're going to change the terminology, wouldn't we have to look at that, approve that, or agree on that before we send it to public hearing? Because if we send it to public hearing and it's something that we don't like,
If, when they advertise it, the verbiage would be contained in the public information, is that correct?
the verbiage would be, but we wouldn't have had a chance to look at the verbiage to agree with it,
And I
right?
don't think we know what changes you're looking for. I mean, I think you could probably, if someone comes up with a better name,
Right.
You know, I don't think that necessarily. I think that you could do that type of change at the meeting,
Right.
and I think the notice is still valid because
Okay.
we've notified people that this is what's going to be considered, and I think changing the name doesn't invalidate that. And again, we're operating under the same text amendment number. So what's basically going to happen is the original version is still kind of been laid on the table. And what this other hearing is for is saying, well, we want to consider alternative language, and it's different enough that we think we should have another public hearing on this alternative language. But then both are going to be before you and the board after a public hearing. So I think to Dr. Horton's point, you know, if you wanted to narrow it further, you could, but we'd have to consider your proposal if you want to have a third one. We may have to write that one up separately because that's actually thinking about it. Yours is more restrictive than any of the two we've already talked about. And so if you want your option, we'd have to write
Well,
that
not
up.
necessarily. I'm just asking, is
Yeah.
anyone interested in that proposal? Because we're talking about data centers, 75 acres
By
and
right.
larger, and we're talking about non-campus is lower than
And
75.
special exception.
Okay,
right.
non-campus is special exception
Right.
because it's lower than 75 acres. So do we just want to cut out non-campus because they're too small?
But then would you keep over 75 acres by right?
I could compromise with that. What I'm just trying to do is limit these data centers
Well, I think, so again, from a staff perspective, I think what we need to know is if you want changes to what we'll call option number 2, which is what's in your packet tonight, we need to know what those are. If you just want to change the terminology, I think that can be done the night of. But if you want any other substantive changes, we would need to know those before we advertise it. And then, so that's 1. And then 2, or maybe that's A. And then B would be, do we want to move forward with your option
75.
number 3?
So just
or-
ask and
yeah.
see which the commissioners prefer.
Yeah. Or do you, I mean, or you could vote on option 2, send that up to the board, and then see what happens with those 2. Because yeah, you would, that you'd have to, your proposal would be a whole, in thinking about it, a whole third lane that would also need to be advertised.
Yeah, see,
It's
I
a-
think the only thing I'm looking to do is it's the terminology between campus and non-campus. That's the only words I'm looking at.
Yeah, that I think we could advertise what's in your packet tonight, and especially having discussed it in this meeting,
Right.
make clear that terminology is someone will have a clever idea of what to call these things that are more descriptive, more accurately descriptive,
That's all I'm saying.
like campus and standalone, or
Yeah, something,
major and
just,
minor,
yeah.
or
But
something
I
like
think
that.
when we start dealing with this campus and non-campus, we're fooling ourselves.
Yeah.
Let us tell the people what it is. It's a building or it's not a building. I'm picking up that terminology, but that's the way I feel about it. Okay. And I
So
think by saying campus and non-campus, we've accomplished absolutely nothing. So if it's a freestanding building, standalone building, or a non-standalone building, that's a terminology that everybody can understand. I think we're fooling ourselves with the words campus and non-campus. That's all I'm saying.
So if the terminology issue is the only issue, I think that can be taken up at the next meeting, and you can move forward with a public hearing on this language if that's what you want.
That's
If you
what I-
also want to address Dr. Horton's kind of third option, we would need to know and write that up and advertise it.
I would
As
say
well.
just change the terminology and let's get this moving along. Just
I agree.
the director's opinion.
And with all due appreciation to my fellow commissioners, my position is going to remain that I think all data centers should be a special exception.
So
That's probably the best way to go.
So, Mr. Chair, so would you entertain a motion tonight for special exception? Passing it up to the Board of Supervisors?
Well, we'd have to have a public meeting.
We would still, I believe we still have to have a public hearing though.
if you want the Board of Supervisors to, if you want to consider option 2, what's in your packet tonight, you need to have a public hearing on it.
But if we go back to, okay, let's see,
If you go back to the original, you would need
You've already had your public hearing on that.
then we could vote on that tonight and it'll go straight to the supervisors, no public hearing, correct?
That's correct.
Well, we could try and see who's in favor of that. If not, you need to go on to the next suggestion. Which would be, I guess, Mr. Weaver's.
I think we need more clarification on this and at least one more round with this, just to make sure it's right.
Let's do that. I hate to say or use the phrase kick the can, but let's bring this up next month. And we've all made our feelings and concerns expressed. And I'll put it on record right now. If I'm not trying to be stubborn or bullheaded, I don't care what you call it, whether it's campus or non-campus. My position is that the data centers all should be by special exception. No need for any feedback. Everybody, please. I just being completely upfront, and we will see what staff comes up with.
Okay.
Is that agreeable? Everyone,
I mean, right now, the only thing I know that you're looking for is a different
Term, right.
which we could, again, and I think, to be honest, I mean, Mr. Chair, if you know your position on this.
yes, sir.
Then the only question is, do you want to have a public hearing on the alternative language to advance it to the board or not? And
That would be my motion.
okay. So but we just need a direction. We can bring you the terms later.
All right.
So is that a
being
motion?
said,
That'd be my motion, yes.
Mr. Chair, well, the only concern I have is that if a motion, and I asked would you entertain a motion, but if a motion came across tonight to go with the original special exception, there would be no need to do any more verbiage. I mean, if that motion passed tonight,
then it would apply to all.
and you wouldn't need to change any verbiage. They wouldn't have to go back and do any
You
verbiage.
understand that, Mr. Weaver? If all data centers are subject to special exception, it doesn't matter what you call them later on down the road. You could call them a Waffle House if you want. But they would still be governed and ruled by a special exception.
I would say that's within what I'm thinking about, okay? That everything when it comes to this data center, Mr. Rollins, I appreciate that, I really do. I think that's the way we have to consider it. We're trying to control, I hate to use that word control. We're trying to stay on top of the changes that are going to happen with these data centers. Some are going to get bigger, some are going to get smaller. I mean, I never realized, I told you, I went to the one thing in Spotsylvania where they told me what a data chip actually was.
Right.
And they described it as the size of a thumbnail. Now, how many do you need for a data center? Guy looks out there in the parking lot and he goes, about 18 wheelers full of them. I didn't know what but now the problem is, yes, you can have them, but now you have to cool them. And that's where this whole issue with data center comes in.
All right.
So,
Well, I'm going
But I mean, my thing is if the board sent it back to us with the original that we're talking about now, they sent it back to us and we're not even, we really haven't reviewed it. Staff has made these recommendations and now we're going to send it back to the board the same way it came back to us? I mean, we're not reviewing it. We're not even taking the
I've
time.
reviewed it, sir.
Okay. So we wasted staff time and everybody else's time of coming up with these extra options, which makes sense because they, as far as I'm concerned, they are more paramount. You have to take greater steps to achieve. You have to take greater steps in order to facilitate a data center, whether it's campus or non-campus, in this capacity than you would with just a regular special exception,
The way it was originally.
the way it was originally. We have more control with these options. We have much more control. And you're only talking, again, a small percentage of parcels.
If even that.
Yes. And to waste resources, time, and everything else with coming to the public and having special exceptions, public hearings on all of this, we're really creating a whole lot of extra work for no reason when we got it right here and we have control.
So, I mean,
I understand your position, Mr. Young, you know, but I think anytime we scrutinize something and look at it really carefully, I don't feel like it's a waste of time. I feel like we're really trying to get to the bottom of the issues. We have citizens come in and propose they want to start a small business, and we scrutinize them all the time. So And these are millionaires we're talking about here, and I think they ought to be scrutinized even more.
But I mean, you know, when we talk about public hearings and we have 7 to 10 individuals here talking about a public hearing, that's to me a waste of resources. I know we can't control who comes to the meetings, but gee whiz, these criteria right here are paramount. Okay, I'm done. I've beaten a dead horse.
Mr. Chairman, if I'm in order, I would like to make a motion that TXT 052024, that we approve the original special exception for M1 for data centers and send it back to the board.
Motion by Mr. Rollins to approve the special exception requirement under TXT 05-2024. Is there a second?
I'll second,
So that's a recommendation of approval on the original language.
which we had last meeting,
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yep, just
So I'm
getting it
looking
clear for
at
the
that. I
record.
just want to make sure what
Yeah,
I'm voting
so
on.
it's just moving the definition from by right to special exception in the M1.
Correct.
Yeah, and that is, we're not going to have the data center campus and the data center non-campus definitions in that.
No, what you vote, what
Very
his
good.
motion was just to move the use from
Just
by
to-
right to
Right,
special exception.
So
very good, thank
and
you.
So the board will not see any of this that's in your packet tonight because you haven't made a recommendation on it. They'll just have the original language.
All right. Commissioners, motion by Mr. Rollins, seconded by Dr. Horton. Is there any further discussion? There being no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
All right, there is division amongst the commissioners. Mr. Rollins, how say ye?
Aye.
Dr. Horton?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Mr. Young
Nay.
and Mr. Weaver
Yes.
and Mr. Williams.
Nay.
All right. Vote is 4-2 in favor of this motion. This matter will be forwarded to the Board of Supervisors with the recommendation of approval. Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, one and all. Moving quickly forward. Are there any and all matters remaining? There being no matters remaining, a motion to adjourn, let's see, do we need a December the 19th meeting, Mr. Hughes? Right close to Christmas,
We don't have any public meetings at that point, at this point scheduled, so.
okay, we have nothing on the agenda slated and nothing appearing on the horizon. So that will put us into our January business meeting. All right, and I don't think I have the date on that. I do not,
Mr. Chair,
sir.
there is something on the horizon, so I would ask that you not cancel the meeting at this time,
Okay, right.
because we may have to have some business, so.
okay, very good. We will have a meeting on December the 19th, 2024 at 6:30 PM unless otherwise canceled. Is there a motion?
Make motion.
Motion by Mr. Young to adjourn till the 19th of December. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Young, seconded by everyone. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned.